Hi, everyone. Hello, good evening. Thank you for joining us today. I am, like Rumbi said, I have, it's a new organization actually, that I started back in November 23, purely because I was seeing a lot of stories, a lot of posts on social media about newly arrived African immigrants struggling to settle in the UK, struggling to support their children, to integrate into UK life. So I started it as a support group, fortnightly support group, just to support, hear out what the issues were, and to advise and guide. It became quite popular. We have a lot of people attending. We've got a WhatsApp group with over 200 people that are currently receiving that support. And on the back of that, I obviously realized that it was a need. There was that need within our community, and formed this organization for that support. I will be able to share more details in the coming weeks. Today, Rumbi's invited me. Thank you, Rumbi, for inviting me to talk about, I think you had a parenting session last week where people had some questions. I've got a couple of questions that were sent to me, I think, that people needed some answers to, and I've also prepared a little bit of a talk around, parenting norms, expectations within the UK, some of the strategies that you can use to support children to settle within the UK when you first arrive, how you can balance that and maintain those cultural practices whilst supporting your children and adhering to UK parenting practices and expectations. And obviously how you can foster those positive parent-child relationships. Because in this country, we all know we are here for a reason, which is to work, earn some money, support our families, both here and back home. But what I find is that a lot of the times, children do end up getting neglected, not intentionally, but that lack of making time for our children can also impact on them quite massively. I think just what I don't want this to be sort of me just talking to people. Please feel free, like Rumbi said, to put questions in the chat and to just ask any questions really that you have, and I'll be happy to answer. I think one of the issues that was raised last time was around how to discipline children within the UK without being accused of abuse. Now, I think there's a huge cultural element to that one, because and now my talk today is mostly going to refer to Africa. I know Rumbi is migrant families, which is very inclusive, but because I focus my work with African parents, I'll probably be referring a lot to African parents rather than a universal term. So with African parents, as you know, sort of smacking your child is the norm back home in Africa. In this country, and I'll talk about the UK and separate the four nations, because the law is very different within the four nations. So you've got England and Northern Ireland, where the law, it's not against the law to smack your child as long as you don't leave a mark, you don't use an implement to hit your child. My advice would be, do not hit your child, because how do you determine what is excessive? How do you measure excessive? Because that is very subjective. It's about your child and the impact that's having on them, how they feel when you smack them. So if they're telling a teacher, for example, at school that, mommy or daddy hit me, it made me feel sad, it really hurt, then the voice of the child is going to be taken a lot more seriously than you then saying, well, yes, I smacked them, but it wasn't that hard. How do you define what it wasn't that hard is? And then you've got Scotland and Wales, where it is illegal to use any form of physical chastisement on a child. So it's important, depending on where you live, it's important that you are aware of the laws within the different 4 nations within the UK. Now, there are a lot of ways that you can discipline your child without using physical chastisement. Also, another thing, before I move on to what other ways that you could use, is also using, one of the biggest concerns that is raised is around emotional harm. And I think people don't always think about that. You've got different categories of what is classed as abuse, really. And people tend to always think of the physical abuse, the sexual abuse, that abuse that you can see, the neglect. But a lot of people don't really consider emotional. So when it comes to discipline, you've got the use of physical chastisement I've just talked about, but you've also got the use of threats. And I think this is another common thing within sort of our community, where we've just come over and we can use that threat of, if you misbehave in school, I will send you back home. If I'll send you back. If you do this, and then I will do this. That also has such a huge emotional impact on children. I'll explain why that is in the context of children that have just arrived from an African country or anywhere, wherever it is that you may be from. So you've got children that have left their country of origin. You've got a decision that has been made by the parents that these children have not probably not had any input into. They've not really had a choice whether they do want to leave their country of origin or not. Parents have decided this is what's best for our family. We're going to move abroad. We're going to live abroad. And usually, yes, children might be excited about the prospect of getting on the plane, going to a new country, having fun, it's going to be a lot of fun. They don't know what they're expecting. But actually, the reality, as you will all recognize, the reality of actually settling in the UK is very different to that view we have before we come into this country. So they've suddenly arrived. They didn't choose to be here. They've now got no family at all. They now come play outside as they're used to back home. They now, live next door to people that don't look like them. They now have neighbors who see them and just look at them and don't say hello to them, something that they're not used to back home. Because as you know, back in Africa, most of our communities, our neighbors, we very much live, not so much now, but still very much the same. We very much have that, it takes a village to raise a child. So you've got that mindset or that sense of security that, if your child is misbehaving and the lady from down the street sees them, they're going to go back into the straight and narrow because, that lady from down the road can tell them off and tell them not to do that, or they can report to their parents, and they can actually discipline them in the way of, getting them to behave wherever they are without you having to physically see or intervene when your child is getting into any type of issues. In this country, you haven't got that. So you've already arrived, you've lost all of that community. As difficult as it may be for you, I want you to just have a sit and think about those feelings you have when you've arrived in this country. That sense of the weather, how isolated it is, how you don't have that sense of community, you probably don't have any family close by, you know, friends. Now you have your child starting school in a school where they don't know a lot of people, is probably not diverse at all. That's a lot to take in for a child. You know, we are adults, we can regulate, we can sort of adjust to that kind of thing. But to ask that of a child is a lot. And because we are so consumed with what we're doing, we're so consumed with what's not going right for us, or maybe what we expected in terms of financially, living conditions, what we expected isn't quite what we got when we got here. We kind of get lost in that, you know, thinking of almost feeling sorry for ourselves, that we forget that we've got these little human beings that we've brought on this journey, and they're just lost. And they can't talk to you because they can see you're probably struggling with your own, you know, difficulties of what's happening in your own adult life. They feel so left out. So imagine they misbehave at school. You get that report from school, and the first thing you say to them is you threaten them that you're going to send them back home. I mean, just imagine the emotional turmoil that a child goes through. And it is, you know, children communicate in a lot of different ways. And with most children, their behavior will tell you what's happening with them. And this is how usually schools pick up on these things. It's not that schools go out, you know, you've got most schools, they've got 400, 600, 500 children. So you're not going to have a school teacher that is going to specifically target your child just to ask them or question them about home life. They pick up those children due to their behaviors. Behaviors in children tell a story. What is happening with them? It might be something happening with them at home. It might be something happening to them within school, and teachers will speak to children to try and understand what it is that's happening with them, to try and support them. And it is during those conversations that it may come up. You know, they may innocently say, I feel really sad today. Why is that? Because yesterday I did something and mommy said, if I do that again, they're going to send me back home, you know, and I'm really worried that I'm going to get sent back home. They're not worried that they've got family over there, but actually that separation from you is massive as well. It is a huge thing for a child. You know, no child wants to be separated from their family or from their parents. So when you use that threat of, I'll send you back home, that is a huge deal to a child, especially if the child doesn't feel like they can talk to you, which is why I keep going back to the issue of communication as well. We are the grown-ups, as my son likes to call us. We are the grown-ups. So we have to be the ones to have that awareness and support our children by communicating effectively with them, understanding what is it that's going on. Are we creating an environment where your child feels safe to come and talk to you about what is happening to them? Are you creating that time to sit down with your child at the end of their school day and asking them how it was? How are they settling in? How are they finding things? Are they confined? Are they able? Do they feel like they can talk to you? Is your emphasis so much on their academic progress that you are not focusing on their emotional well-being as well? Because that's another big part. I've just talked about all of these challenges that this child has to face to come into the UK. And I suppose it's by default, because that's how we were raised, that education is the most important thing. And it is. It is. But have you given your child time to transition? And how long is enough time to transition, to be able to settle and be at a place where they've adjusted, they've integrated, you know, they have adjusted in terms of, I know, you know, something was raised about accents within school. That's also a challenge. You know, your child may have been in a Group A school in Africa and they speak very good English, but actually, how many of us, as much as we can speak good English, do struggle to understand when we come into this country because the accent is so different. So are you giving your child enough time to adjust to that? And how long is enough time? That is very subjective because some children pick up things really quickly. You know, you might have a child that's been in this country for 5-6 months and already they speak the same as most children around them. And then you might have a child that's been here for, you know, a year, 2 years, and they still struggle to understand what's being said to them. What are you doing as a parent to support your child to integrate? What activities are you doing? Because it's not just about school or leaving it all to school. What are you doing that promotes your child's integration into the community that they now live in? What activities are you doing with them to support them, you know, to understand the different cues, the different, you know, there's, you know, sense of humor. It's those little things that really matter. You know, your child is sitting in class and then another child makes a joke. And we all know, and I think I'm not the only one that always says, oh, when I first arrived that, you know, English humor can be difficult to get, you know. It's very difficult to get. So what activities are you doing with your child? Are you attending? Because a lot of local authorities will have events. For example, in school holidays, you will have schools will send out flyers of what events are going out. Even if you phone your local authority, they will have a series of different events taking place for children during school holidays. Are you taking your children out? And this is not just school-age children, even younger children. You've got parenting support groups, you know, you've got play centers, you know. Are you somebody that is shying away from interacting with other moms? Because this is how you get to learn and how you get to interact with your children. So in terms of discipline, you know, without physical chastisement, the use of physical chastisement or threats, there are a number. Most children now have gadgets. It's about what boundaries you're setting from the beginning. Most children respond well to consistency. I always say to people, children like discipline. You know, they know that they should be parented, and in their parenting, they know and accept that there should be boundaries, there should be discipline. And children expect, believe it or not, children expect that from us. A lot of the time, if your boundaries and guidance is quite laxed, you will see your child pushing quite a lot. And a lot of the times, if they're doing that, that means they're trying to see how far they can push it with you. And they will keep pushing and pushing and pushing. But it's about consistency. What is it that, I always give this example, you know, you've got a child that you've raised and allowed them to do all sorts of things, do whatever they want. You know, they've had a phone, for example, from a very young age. At the point at which you've given them that phone, you've not put any boundaries in place about, you know, parental controls, what social media they can access, how they can use that phone, any guidance about, you know, it's bedtime at such and such a time, your phone stays downstairs, it doesn't go with you to bed. And your child gets to 14, 15, they start really, really pushing boundaries. They become quite challenging to manage. They're chatting back to you. They're not listening. And this is the time you now want to start saying, give me your phone. I'm going to take your phone away from you. You can't take your phone to bed. Well, you've done it all their life. You've done it since they were maybe 9. Some people give phones to children now as early as 7 and 8. You know, they've had a phone since they were 7, they were 8, they were 9, and now they're 15, and you're telling them you're going to take their phone away? It's not going to work, is it? It's not going to work because they will push back. And actually at that time, at that age, they are much, much older that they can really push back. They can chat back. And that's where the problem begins, isn't it? Because that is when it's testing your cultural values as an African parent who was raised to believe that children do not speak to their parents in that way. And that's where it can get to that point where, you can get physical with your child, or you can use that threatening language that I was talking about. Children research, they have visits from Childline in schools, so they know their rights because they're being taught that all the time. And this country does really, really observe children's rights. And the child's voice is at the forefront of everything. I also have said this in my support groups quite a lot, because I think one of the challenges that people have is when a child makes an allegation, and I like to call it an allegation, makes an allegation against a parent in school, the priority for all professionals is safeguarding the child first, regardless of whether it's true or not. The priority is always the safety of the child. So if your child is reported to a teacher that, you've hit them that morning, you've used an implement to hit them, you've used a wooden stick is one that I hear a lot, a wooden stick or a belt. So professionals aren't going to send your child home. They have to investigate first, and then bring your child back home when they felt that it's safe to do so. So, and I know that's an area that most people really, really struggle to comprehend and to understand. But it's about, what do you do after that? How do you engage and cooperate with the different agencies that are doing that investigation? It doesn't necessarily mean they believe you've done it, but they have to safeguard the child. Or it doesn't mean that they have evidence that you've done it. What they're doing by the investigation is actually trying to see whether there is evidence or not. And it's in your best interest to cooperate. Because if there's nothing to worry about, if there's no, if you haven't done it, then you've got nothing to worry about. They will finish their investigation and your child will come home. So that's one of the things to think about. So it is consistency really is key. Setting clear boundaries with children is key. What are my parents' expectations of me as a child? What are our values within our household? Be it cultural values, be it religious values. What is it that is important to you as your family, that you value the most? Your children should know that, because you are raising them in that environment. So they should know what the most important things within your families are. So if they do break those boundaries and they get pulled up on it, they know where they've gone wrong. They know what they've done wrong, because they know what it is that is expected of them by their parents. Another thing is, what are we doing as parents to educate ourselves about the UK way of life, what the parenting expectations are, what the law says about how you parent your child. And I think this is a difficult one for most children, because it almost, when you come into this country, you almost feel like, actually, do I have control over my child? Do I really? Because back home, your child is your child. And you're all of a sudden, you're here where, you are told you can do this, you can't do that, you can't do that. Your child's views matter. If your 15-year-old or 14-year-old today was to say, I don't want to live with my parents anymore, they get listened to. Of course, it's not as simple as that. But if they've got a justified reason why they're saying that, those wishes have to be respected. So it's about you having that knowledge and that understanding of what does the law say? What is it as a parent that you can and can't do? How are you supporting your children also to understand the law in this country, where it comes to their rights, your rights as a parent? It's not to say you don't have a right. You don't have the rights as a parent, you do. But it's to what extent those rights cross over with the children's rights as well, because children do have rights as well. And it's that open communication that I keep talking about. Understanding the cultural differences within the UK. How are you supporting your children to not experience that conflict of they go out there, like I said, maintaining those cultural values, those traditions, those rituals within your families, those ceremonies, those customs that you do within your families. How are you helping your children to understand and feel comfortable and confident in being who they are when they go outside and meet children that experience very different, may actually mock their traditions, may actually bully them for being different? How are you supporting your children to build that resilience and to maintain that confidence and own their cultural heritage and background and feel, confident in sharing, in presenting themselves and have that pride actually to share and educate others about who they are and where they're from? How are you supporting your child to do that as a parent? Getting involved in community events. Now, I am very pleased to say I'm seeing increasingly more and more community organizations being formed that are specific for Africans. That's really pleasing to see. But are you taking the time to engage in those platforms? Because that is also where you get to learn. And as you know, we learn a lot from, experiences, from hearing other people's experiences, and that's how we support each other as a community. And I keep stressing this in my groups that, as I mentioned, most of us don't have family here. We're the only ones that are here. We don't have any friends who live around us, but you have to be innovative, I think, and start to create your own village. You have to build your own village. Who is that village for you? Are you creating that village around you and your child or children? Those are some of the things that we think about, to think about. I've just addressed one of the questions that I was sent was around how do we parent children struggling to fit in and make friends? It starts with you as a parent. It really does start with you, because if you are a parent who is at work, I know we all have to work, but you're at work, you're not engaging with others, you are that parent that, drops your child off to school and you put your hoodie on, avoiding to talk to some of the parents at the school drop-off. You avoid joining those class WhatsApp groups with other parents. How do you know what's happening in your child's class? How do you know what is happening within the school environment? And actually, if you can't be bothered to talk to the other parents, why should your child feel safe enough to make friends within their class with those children? A lot of parents share these things. For example, you've got different activities happening in school. We're also busy. Sometimes you might miss something. You might miss something. You might miss that non-uniform day. You might miss that, activity happening in school. Those groups, people usually post on there and remind each other all the time. So it is useful to keep within that community. It does start with you. The more you interact with the outside world, the more you convince your child that it is safe to do so. Our children learn from us all the time. If you're, hiding away and not communicating with, people within the community, with those people that don't look like you, how does your child build that confidence to be able to speak out or to interact with those people outside? Oh, okay. I thought somebody had a question then. Co-parenting, I think, is another big one. Well, firstly, it's not just co-parenting. For those parents that sadly have to separate or have to divorce, you do have a number of things to consider also. Like I said, you've got all of those issues that I described at the beginning, where children can struggle, can really, really struggle to adjust to coming into this country. Then add the mix of perhaps the parents have separated or divorced. I mean, divorce or separation is hard on any child anyway. And I think we really underestimate the impact on children when parents divorce or separate. It's massive. It is massive because children are suddenly stuck in the middle of these two people that they love dearly. And a lot of the time, they feel like they have to pick a side. And usually it's the side of the parent that they're living with. So the children already have that massive emotional turbulence going on. And then add that in the mix of actually these two parents struggling to cope with the separation themselves, being so self-absorbed about their own feelings about what's going on, that a lot of the time the child's feelings and their own experiences of loss, it's a huge loss for them, of that family unit, of that parent that gets to leave the house. It's a massive loss for those children, not being able to see that parent when they want. And a lot of the times there's probably conflict between the parents that they get caught up in between. And then the parents themselves struggling to co-parent. One of the biggest issues in this country, and I know everyone will relate to this, is childcare. When a separation or a divorce happens, that has a huge impact on childcare because a lot of people juggle or balance the childcare responsibilities between them when they're married. Maybe one works nights, one works days. They swap doing the school run and stuff like that. And then you suddenly find yourself as a single parent having to manage all of that on your own. And this is where you may have those instances where children are left on their own, which is another huge concern and issue, because that, there is no, and I think one of the hardest things as well, other than the law being so different in this country to where we come from in Africa, it is that the law sometimes is so blurred as well, where, like I've already talked about, there's no law that says you can't smack your child, although I advise against it strongly. There is also no law that says at what age you can leave your child on their own. It leaves it to you as the parent to make that decision. Now, there is two things with that. you know, as a parent, you can make a decision to leave your child on their own, whatever age. The only thing that the law asks is that your child knows what to do in an emergency. They have food, they are able to look after themselves. And well, like I said, in an emergency, they know what to do to keep themselves safe. But the law then extends to, if you have more than one child, you cannot leave another child, give the responsibility of one child to another. So you can't leave, say, a 12-year-old and a 3-year-old and expect that the 12-year-old will look after the 3-year-old. I mean, by all means, you can leave the 12-year-old on their own, because probably they're old enough to open the fridge, get themselves food, feed themselves, watch TV, get themselves drinks. Even in emergency, they can pick up the phone and call emergency services if you've taught them to. But you can't leave them responsible for a 3-year-old child. Now that you would be breaking the law if you left 2 children that are very young together, unless they are both old enough to look after themselves, I suppose. Say if you left 2 12-year-olds or 2 13-year-olds, or an 11-year-old and a 13-year-old, I guess. So those are some of the things as well, just to be mindful of when you leave children on their own. It is important to have those positive co-parenting. And I think increasingly now people are, starting to co-parent positively. It's good for the children, it supports the children's emotional needs. It also supports them to have that stability and consistency when both parents are positively involved with children. But obviously, there is also a downside if there is significant conflict between the parents. Exposing children to that can also cause significant harm to them by way of emotional harm. Now, I feel like I've been talking forever. I'm just going to see if there's been any questions in the chat, or if anyone's got any questions about what I've shared so far. Can't see any questions, or if anyone's got any specific questions they want to ask. No? I'm sure somebody's got a question. Okay, while you're thinking about it.
Sorry, I'm just going to ask something and just take you back a little bit. You said about threats, emotional abuse or emotional harm. Like when you threaten a child that I will send you back. If you misbehave, you'll go back. And perhaps, so would that actually be something that like social services would actually intervene and take it very seriously if a child tells them that that's what's happening at home?
Well, yes and no. It's a bit of a difficult one because, there has to be context to it, I suppose. If a child's just saying, I'm being threatened, schools a lot of the times will speak to parents and they will share that. I mean, really, they have to do that by law. And even if they're going to make a referral to social services, they have to inform the parent anyway. Unless informing the parent places the child even further at risk of harm. So there are circumstances where they don't tell parents, but majority of the times they have to tell parents. So a school, for example, if it was just that a child is saying, mom said they're going to send me back home, school will speak to the parents and they will say, this is what your child's told us. What's happening at home? Are you struggling to put boundaries in place. Why is it that you're threatening them? And a lot of the times within schools, they are parenting support workers. They're parents, what are they called? Support workers that support parents. So, and they can refer parents for, you know, parenting courses and things like that. So if a child is saying something like that, they speak to the parent, and if it's an issue around guidance and boundaries, then they can signpost, or they can ask if you need an early help referral. So early help services are part of social services, but they are not statutory intervention, it's voluntary. So they can offer things like parenting support. If you, for example, if you've got a teenager that is really pushing boundaries and you're struggling and you're worried that they are engaging in behaviors that are placing themselves at risk, or that they potentially are becoming beyond parental control, because you do have those children that are beyond parental control, that you can ask for support through early help, and you can be assigned a family support worker that then supports you to build some of those boundaries, do some direct work with the child, understand what it is that is happening with them, to support you to parent them effectively. So in a nutshell, if that was the only issue, Rumbi, no, that wouldn't lead to a referral to social services, but perhaps a discussion with the school, and the school would also help you to understand the emotional impact on the child of using that form of discipline. And also they may also add, because for the child to have that conversation with school, it may be that they've started acting out in school, or that they are actually looking anxious in school, or they are looking sad. So it is in response to that behavior that school might actually tell you, yeah, it is impacting on your child. So that might not be the best way to deal with it. Yes, Rumbi.
Sorry, I've got lots of questions. Thank you. I've also got another question, because I know that some of these are questions that people ask, and maybe they don't want to ask. I don't know, but there is there's some people who are struggling. Like, I think most of the people that are on this call maybe are carers, because that's where we've invited people and advertised new arrivals.
Yeah.
And there's a problem that people are not getting enough hours at work. It's a widespread problem all over the UK.
Yeah.
And so they don't have enough money, like, to pay their bills. And some people are really struggling with the children, living in houses that are overcrowded and exposing the children to a lot of risks. And I've spoken to some people who are on the verge of, who are actually being evicted, and who are so worried, but they refuse for a referral to be made. I try to persuade them that, if you go to social services, they will help you. And they can help you even just to let you just get yourselves back on your feet, especially for the children, because the children are so destabilized, and it's not it's not right for them to be living in that way. But people are resistant, and they're so scared of social services. And it's not only new arrivals, it's also people who've been here a little bit longer, who tell them, if you start with social services, the kids are going to go. Even what you mentioned about having early help from the family support worker, it's a myth that if you even get help, they'll come after you and take your kids. And I try as well, when I speak to people, to demystify that. But perhaps you can just explain a little bit more about the help that's available from social services, rather than the threat of taking the children.
Yeah, there is definitely a misconception about the role of social services. It's not that simple to just take somebody's child, guys. It really isn't. There's laws that have to be adhered to. There is different, it's not even social services that take somebody's child, really. It is the court And for a court to make that decision, there needs to be a lot of evidence to prove that that child's, that child is at significant risk of harm, imminent risk of significant harm, or that without being removed from their family, they would, face, or they would be subject to significant harm. And that test is not easy to achieve without evidence. So there are a number of, I've discussed, I know this is not my group, but within my group, I've covered some of the different safeguarding laws that social workers have to adhere to. And one of those is, you've got the United Nations Convention on Human Rights of the Child, which is, usually what sets out the rights of children to protection from abuse and exploitation, amongst other things. And that is vital. But you've also got the European Convention of Human Rights. That is also, rights that protect the parents. And as I always say to people, you've got, is it Article 8, the right to family life, I think it is, that one. So you've got to remember, every time a child is removed, it is in breach of that human right. And there has to be evidence why that your human right to family life has to be breached. So it's not just a case of, I seek help, my child is removed. Nobody would have their child taken away for seeking help. In fact, it is the opposite. If you don't get help and that places your child at risk of harm, that is neglect. And that neglect can lead to social services involvement at statutory level. So that is the difference. So, by seeking help, you are struggling, you haven't got any money. Like I said, you've got early help. They support with things like housing. I mean, everything is subject to assessment. And I think it's also important for me to emphasize the fact that, a lot of the group we're talking about are people who do not have recourse to public funds. So the support you would receive from social services would be means tested and assessed to see whether there is definitely a need. So it's not a matter of, I'm just going to go to social services and they'll give me this, they'll give me that. They won't do that. They will do an assessment first of your needs to see whether that support is needed and whether that support, if not provided, could really impact on your children. So that's you can receive support from social services under what's called Section 17. Now, that places duty on the local authority to support any child within its area. So that support comes from your local authority where you live. And you can access that support through early help. If you had an early help referral, for example, if there are no safeguarding concerns, there is no reason why social services would need to be involved at a statutory level. So when I say statutory level, that is, we are talking child protection level. So there would be a statutory role for the local authority to intervene, a requirement for the local authority to intervene where it is felt that your child may be at risk or is suffering significant harm. So now that one is not a choice, they just intervene. But in terms of early help, that is by consent of you as a parent, and you can get that support. But you can also get support from schools as well. For example, if you were struggling, like some of the examples that Rumbi has mentioned, if you didn't, if you're not working and you really are struggling to feed your children, you can reach out to school and ask for a food voucher, and they will provide you, a food bank voucher. or your children's centers. And I know a lot of areas, children's centers are closing. Now you've got children's hubs, they're called in some areas, or children's centers. You know, if you go to them, they also have family support workers on site that are there to support. So if you just ask whatever support that is you need, they will be able to signpost you and support. But I can't emphasize enough that seeking help is, you know, would not result in your children being removed. It is actually a good thing. That's a positive thing. And Section 17 support I've just seen in the chat, is that not public public funds? No, it isn't, because it is support for children, not for you as a parent. You're getting that support through your child. And it is at the discretion of the local authority. So every child is entitled, every child in need is entitled to support under Section 17, and the local authority can offer that support, even if you don't have recourse to public funds. I'm gonna have a look in the chat, because I think I can see people have put things in the chat. Somebody's put that their family is coming soon. They've got children, 7 years, 4 years, 1 year. No, you don't need, how many rooms would you need? I mean, it's up to you, really. There's no law that dictates, you know, if you're a family, what rooms you should have. Of course, if you live in a bed sit, that's going to be overcrowded and probably not the best thing. But I would say your children can share a bedroom if you get a bedroom that is big enough. So a 2-bedroomed house is sufficient, but that's down to you and your family circumstances. I don't think there's any law that dictates what size house you should have. That's up to you, really, what you want. Caroline's got the hand up.
Yeah, I just want to ask, let's say your children are in year 4 and year 5.
Mm-hmm.
At school, they are now allowed to go on their own, even getting out from school, coming home without taking them from school, even picking them. So let's say
What
they
age
come.
did you say, sorry?
Year 4 and year 5.
Year 4 and year 5.
Yes. There's a form which you can fill if you want them to come on their own, coming home, even going to school on their own. They're allowed that. So let's say I'm doing afternoon shift. They are finishing at 3, and then I set my shift from 2 o'clock to 8 o'clock. And then they will come at home. They will be having their own keys. They will come in, and then they stay indoors until I come. Is it allowed?
Year 4 and year 5 is what age? Remind me again.
Oh, year 4, it will be 8 years, and year 5 about 10 years old.
That's a really difficult one, because I mean, I wouldn't be advocating if an 8-year-old to walk from school on their own. For starters, that's a bit young. Most schools don't even allow that, in my recollection. So that would be quite a difficult one. But 2 to 8, so from about 3:30, 4 o'clock, they would be on their own. I would say absolutely not. That's too young.
Okay.
Because you're basically expecting the 10-year-old to look after the 8-year-old while you're away for 4 hours. And who makes tea for them? Who makes dinner for them? And who puts them to bed? Because by 8 o'clock, really, they are probably getting ready for bed. So who does that while you're at work?
The food will be already prepared.
That's a really
it's just putting in the microwave, or maybe they'll just have some sandwiches.
No, that's literally them looking after themselves, isn't it, for 4 hours? So they've been at school all day. You haven't seen them. They get home on their own. I know it's really difficult, but, is there any way you could get maybe somebody that can come and stay with them? an hour or two when they get home in from school, you could get away with, but not up until 8 o'clock. And you're probably not getting home till about 8:39. That's a very long time.
Okay.
On their own. That would be, I wouldn't advise against that. And I think you would get into trouble if a referral was made in respect of that.
Okay.
Yeah, that is a very long time. They are very young children. It's not like they're teenagers. I mean, if you were talking a 12 and a 13-year-old, that's different. But an 8 and a 10-year-old, that's really young. I would advise against any child in primary school age to be left for that long on their own. Secondary school is different.
Okay. We are learning.
Yeah, no, I would best avoid and arrange childcare. But I think the tricky part for you, because I was going to say, couldn't you utilize the after school club so that they at least stay at the after school club till 6 o'clock and then go home? But
after school club is only one day.
Why can't you give them after school club all week?
They've got only one after school club per week, only on Thursday at the moment.
Right. No, but I mean not after school activities, but I mean like you've got childcare facilities. Some schools offer that after school clubs, that they look after your child until 6 o'clock.
There's no any facility like that.
They don't have that. Or in your local area, they may be, maybe someone who runs an after school club and actually collects children from school and takes them to the after school club that is local to the school. It might be worth just checking, because that might be a better arrangement. But you would also need to check whether they would agree for the children, because most after school clubs are quite strict. They wouldn't just let children go on their own. They would want them to be collected at 6 o'clock.
Okay.
Yeah, but I wouldn't advise you to leave your children 8 and 10 on their own. No.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
That's okay. I'm just checking for any more questions.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
I just wanted to ask, is a 12-year-old allowed to date in the UK?
Allowed to date?
Yeah, to date.
Well, children start to take interest in the opposite sex, much younger now. It can happen at any age, can't it? So it's about that openness that I was talking about earlier on. What discussions are you having with your children about relationships? I don't think there's anything wrong with a 12-year-old having interest in the opposite sex. That is a natural way of children developing. It's about, I would start to worry about it if they just have a crush on a boy or a girl. That's very natural. It's a natural stage of development for children. But I would start to worry if they are talking to people online, if that, people that you don't know who they are, whether they are, adults pretending to be children, or if they start receiving gifts, you start to see them with gifts, with expensive, toys, a new phone, perhaps, that they say their boyfriend has bought them, because that is definitely a sign that your child probably is being groomed. So it is those things to watch out for. But I think I encourage really healthy conversations around relationships. If you feel your child is starting to show interest in the opposite sex, talk to them about it openly. Ask them, what is it that they like about this person? Who is this person? How is it, what is it? What do they think they feel? Because a lot of it, they just have a little excitement about, this boy, this girl. A lot of the times they don't even know what that means. Understand, have an open dialogue with them. about that, because you're the person that can model healthy relationships to them. You know, if they have a boy that they like, they are 12. You know, most children at school are talking about having a crush here and then. I'm sure you can relate. You know, when we were younger, you did start to have interest in boys at that age, because that's the age you're sort of going into Form 1, Form 2. You know, you start to take that interest in the opposite sex. There is nothing wrong with it. It's about having those dialogues with your children so that they do feel, like I said, it's important that your child feels safe enough to come and talk to you about it, because it is likely that when they start that relationship, they will come and open up to you about it.
Yeah, so she did come and she told me, Mom, there's a boy I like in school and he likes me, so I want to start dating. Can I date him? And then I said, no, you're still very young. You cannot do that. So she was complaining that, why are you refusing for me to date someone? So, you know, I was taking it from our own point of view, our own culture back home, that she's too young to start dating. But
Yeah,
now,
she probably is young, but over here it's quite normal. And I'm not saying be lax about it. You can still talk about, you know, those cultural values and stuff like that with them. But it would be very difficult for you to completely say no, because if you completely say no, then they're probably going to do it behind your back anyway. So it's better for you to just talk to them, encourage, you know, that conversation about what is it that you like about this boy. You know, are you talking to him? What is it that you know you want to be doing? You know, she might say she wants to just go watch a movie with him or something. You know, offer to drop her off and pick her up. They're friends.
oh, okay.
That's, you know, that's what they are. Offer to drop her off and then pick her up.
Yeah, okay. That's quite
They will find that they don't even like them. After 2 weeks, they get over it and they move on to, oh, I don't think I like him anymore. I think I like that one now.
okay.
Yeah. I think it's just important to have that open dialogue. I noticed my daughter is on the line. She's probably thinking, you never did that with me. But but it is very difficult, but you can be supportive in having those conversations. Like I said, most of their friends at school probably do already have boyfriends. And like I'll say most of, you know, some of you'll find where it's when you talk to I'm going to use the term white parents, you will find that they are more open to nurturing those relationships from a very young age, and they are more inviting and receptive to those children building those relationships at an early age. So you will find if your child has a lot of, you know, friends who are white, they will struggle with you pushing back to say no.
Okay.
So it's about how you balance that as a parent. If it's something that you're very, you know, strongly about, then, you know, it's about how you communicate, and it's about setting those values from an early age. Like I already said, do you have consistent values that cultural values or family values that you're sharing with your children, that when she gets to that age, she knows that actually within my family, this is a no-no. If you haven't got that from an early age, then it would be very difficult to then set those boundaries later on. For example, if you're a Christian and your child is going to church and they're going to those youth conferences, then those expectations are set from a religious perspective, because they're going to church, they know what the expectations are. But if you haven't got that, and you also haven't got those, you know, values and boundaries set within your home, then it would be very difficult to now say no.
I understand.
Yeah.
I understand. Thank you very much.
That's okay. I'm trying to see if, I don't know, Rumbi, over to you. I don't know if anyone else has got any more questions. I can't see any more questions in the chat.
Thank you so much, Chenai. That was a great and insightful conversation that we had. Thank you all for joining us. If anyone would like maybe a one-on-one with Chenai, we'll definitely share her details for you to get in touch with her. Otherwise, thank you so much, Chenai. Maybe to all those who have joined us for the first time, we are Tulia. We are a legal advice and holistic support organization that is based in the United Kingdom. And these are part of our services that we offer: legal advice on UK immigration, visa applications, skilled worker applications, visitors, etc. We also help with appeals and administrative reviews. Maybe you've got a visa that has been refused, and also British citizenship. We can help you with that. Something that you can do now is to scan that QR code. We've since started our cluster groups, which you can join. A cluster group is simply a group in your area, in the city that you stay in, where we can be giving you updates, maybe on job vacancies that are available, on any meetups, any events. You can join one of the clusters, and you need to sign up for you to join. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. We're all available. Even if you'd like to work with us, you may want to volunteer. Please do so by registering to volunteer on our website. You can also scan this link in order for you to do that. Otherwise, thank you all for joining us today, and we hope to see you in our next webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.